Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a seasoned guest for you today, Scott Springer, here to talk to us all about executive leadership, company culture, consulting, kind of the bread and butter topics for the audience in the corporate world. He's got an extensive background that he's going to talk about. He's also writing a book, and I'm really happy to have him on the show. So, Scott, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here, Christopher. Thanks for having me.
So I know, just very briefly, talk about what you do, your company, how you got there and how the audience can benefit from your expertise.
Yeah, so real quick, a little bit of background. Started out in the Navy and then I was in manufacturing for 25 years. I was always the turnaround guy. I was always the guy that went from plant to plant to plant to turn it around, fix it, get it running great. And then a headhunter would call me, I'd go to another one. The last big company I worked for was Vital Proteins. We grew 100% a year for 5 straight years, sold to Nestle, and I started my own consulting company. I was tired of doing a move. I moved all over the United States, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do consulting and help other small companies scale up like we did at Vital. Companies that want to grow 6, 7 figures in a year or double in size, triple in size. I wouldn't recommend tripling. It's almost too much. But, companies that want to grow 50 to 100% a year, that's what I help them do right now.
Yeah, and fantastic story. So, we'll talk about company culture and growth. There's so many topics to discuss. So, we'll dive right into it. So just kind of underperforming organizations and you revitalize them. So what is your approach to diagnosis and the steps you take in the revitalization process?
Well, it's like three categories that you look at. You look at people, processes, and equipment, right? And so you look at the people, and 95% of the time, it's not a people issue. It might be a little bit of a leadership issue. It could be a manager issue, but usually not the people on the floor, right? A lot of times it's the processes are not dialed in. People are just kind of winging it every single day. They're being reactive to every order, every process, every issue that goes on the floor. So dial in the processes. And then you look at the equipment, what equipment needs to be upgraded. Is there a maintenance program in place? Are the people maintaining it, or are they just running it till it breaks? Or is the equipment antiquated? Sometimes the equipment it's time to replace it. You can't drive around a 76 Chevy, your whole life. You can, but it's like, it becomes costly and inefficient, spending a lot of money on gas. And it's the same thing in a factory. You get an old plant, and if you're down all the time because of an old antiquated piece of equipment, might be time to replace it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. People, I love that. So then the next question is, as you talk about scaling business growth, obviously, without company culture, it's really hard. So you create great company cultures. What are key elements that contribute to a positive culture, and how can leaders cultivate trust within their teams?
It gets down to the leaders in the plant, right? Starting with the top person in a plant, usually a plant manager or director of manufacturing. And then you make sure you funnel it down to the manager level, supervisor level below that. And it gets down to how they communicate to people. Are they letting them know what's coming up? Are they keeping the people informed? Are they receiving and accepting the feedback from people on the floor? A lot of times people close off the floor. They don't want to hear the complaints from the floor, right? When I was in the Navy, we used to have a saying, it was kind of funny, but it was true. It was like a happy sailor is a complaining sailor. It's like people are going to complain. Everybody complains. I complain. You probably complain. Everybody complains. It's like, don't take it personal. You got to differentiate between what's a legitimate complaint and what's a complaint just for complaining, and it's like, well, do you want us to fix that? They're like, no, I just wanted to let you know, it's like, you get stuff like that. But it's communicating to the people regularly, talking to them, treating them with respect. You got the golden rule, but really work on the platinum rule. It's like, treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way necessarily you want to be treated, and that's really creates that bridge. People complain about the generation gap, and I never had that big of an issue because I always treated people the way they want to be treated. I always tried to elevate it higher than other factories. Tried to treat them better as much as we can. We still got to run a business. Everybody has to run a business. But I usually try to have minimal number of rules, right? Attendance was the only one that I was like a stickler on. but my attendance policies were fairly lenient. But if you were outside that leniency, it was like, sorry, it's like, and then that usually, it's funny how attendance hides other issues. What I always found was the people that had the attendance issues were also the people that were creating your quality issues.
Yeah.
The people with your attendance issues were also causing a lot of downtime when they were there. It's weird, not all the time, but a lot of time that's what it was. But it gets down to communication, talking to the people regularly, treating them well. The first time I was a plant manager, I was brought in not because the plant was running well. I was brought in because the plant manager was fired, the warehouse manager was fired, and it was like one of the worst running plants in the company. This is a company called Bungie, and Bungie's a great company, and I got headhunted to go be a plant manager. And so I came in, and one of the first things I did, because there was a significant lack of safety in that plant. A lot of people got hurt. Guy was permanently disabled a couple months before I started. And so I came in, and one of the first things I did there was a lot of plants do monthly or quarterly town hall meetings. I did them weekly. Every single week, every single person in the plant. I did like 2 or 3 in a week so that people can attend one of them. They only had to go to one of the meetings. And every single week, we were talking about safety. We were talking about quality. We were talking about issues on the floor. We were talking about procedure changes. We were keeping the people informed. And it was either me or one of my senior managers was leading the meeting, or we would split it. Some people would do half and the other half. But that weekly meeting, I rolled that out into other plants as I went to other companies. And it has a huge impact. It's that communication. It's treating people with respect. And it was funny because every plant was the same way. It was like the first 6 months, everybody's just quiet. They're just listening. And then 6 months to a year, they start to engage. And after the first year, it's like a free for all. It's just like, in a good way, not in a bad way, but it was like everybody getting involved in the meetings and having good meetings. But it's maintaining that communication and the respect of the people and listening to them really is what helps. Probably I would say number one is how you treat people, how you talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. The first time I heard about company culture as an asset was through Tony Hsieh, rest in peace, where he's talking about he created a fantastic company culture with Zappos. And then yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned the attendance, because I've also noticed the same thing. It's like if you don't honor the time, if you don't show up on time, it's usually an indication of a character or integrity issue that leads to a lot of problems. So we can talk, on a more positive note. The question is, when you say you doubled and tripled businesses, what strategies have you found most effective in driving business growth, particularly in your industries?
The number one is like a vision. A lot of people are very short-sighted. They're trying to get through the week, get through the month, get through the next big order, whatever it is. And I always looked out. I'm always like keeping an eye on 1 to 2 years out or 3 years out. Like we would do strategic planning, and it would be a 3-year vision. What do we want to be like 3 years from now? And then what do we need to do this year, right, to make sure that in 3 years we're reaching that vision of what we want to be like? And when I say when we be like, what do we want to be like from a production standpoint? How much do we want to produce? What is the quality of our product, and what certifications do we want to have? What's our status? What do we want to be like from a safety standpoint, from a shipping standpoint? Like how do we want to be perceived? It's almost like building the operations brand for the company. Right? It's like, what do we want to be? Because whenever I come in, the company's not running well. There's usually a lot of issues. It's like, okay, so we got to start building that foundation. And that foundation is usually that first year. And then you break out the year into quarters. Like, what do we got to get done this quarter in order to make our year goals? And you have your KPIs and your numbers, but I'm talking about like processes and foundations and stuff that makes the KPIs easy to achieve versus like you're trying to achieve the KPIs all the time. And that gets back into the very first question. It's like the processes. What processes are in place? And let's say over like 3 years, we're going to change every single process in the plant. But which ones do we need to change in the next quarter are the highest critical ones. We're not going to change them all in the first quarter, and we're not going to change them all in the first year. It's like, which ones do we have to change now? Which ones can we work on next year? Which ones are we going to work on year 3 to get where we need? And so it's looking at those visions, and it's really like, if you know theory of constraints, right? So you're going to have your Herbie, right? Your slowest point in the plan, or the biggest bottleneck, and it could be turnover, it could be a safety issue, it could be a quality issue, it could be a throughput issue on certain lines, order taking process, whatever it is. Every plant's different. Every plant has its issues. So you look at where are your different bottlenecks, and then you start paratoing. Okay, once I fix this bottleneck, what's going to be my next bottleneck? We'll work on that one next quarter. And then what's going to be the bottleneck after that one? And you work your way down. You adjust them over time. Excuse me. But you're looking at your bottlenecks and just de-bottlenecking the plant slowly. You're always going to have a bottleneck, but make it so that the bottleneck is not an issue. You're able to meet all the customers' requirements, with no quality issue. Slowly work on it. But you got to start with that 3-year vision, 5-year vision, in that range.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And moving on, what's interesting is you mentioned this, it's difficult to grow a company 3x. And what's interesting is because I'm here in Silicon Valley, and it's like these entrepreneurs, they raise all these funding rounds, and it's actually, you want hyper scale growth. So can you talk about the factors that contribute to like the difficulties in growing a company? You said 2x is fine, but then 3x becomes really unmanageable. What happens if you have like 10x, 50x, 100x? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it depends on the company itself too, right? What type of company it is. And my experiences with like manufacturing companies. So you got to like get machinery installed and stuff like that. And so it is possible, but I'm just saying, like, the stress level goes up exponentially. So, exponentially, right? So like, we did 100% growth a year at Vitals, and it was exciting. Everybody's glad they did it. And almost to you ask anyone, it's like, would you want to do that again? They're like, yeah, no, not really. It's like, because of the amount of stress level, because we inherit a plant, and we're built a brand new plant for Vital Proteins while we're growing 100%. And we inherited a situation where most of the processes were really antiquated and really need to be revamped. So it wasn't like you're growing 100% with good processes, good equipment, right? And the leadership team is dialed in. And we had a good leadership team, don't get me wrong. But, it's like we had to train a lot of people while we're growing 100%, building a plant while we're growing 100%. It's like, if you build the foundation and grow 100%, that's easy. If you grow 100% and then you're fixing it as you go along, the stress level's a lot higher, because there wasn't a plan in place initially, until we got there and developed that 3-year plan. And we had the vision of doubling every single year. So it's like, it's almost like the first year was like play catch up to where we were and get ready for the next year's 100% growth. If you don't have that, if you're going to grow 100% a year, if you're going to grow 200% a year, you got to have it laid out for 3 years. And then you got to start putting in all the details of what needs to be done every year to sustain that growth. So many companies will grow 100%, 200% for the first year or two. They don't have their processes in place. They don't have their capacity planning done properly. And they'll grow 100%, and then you'll see the next year, it just falls off. And then they drop 50%. And they got all the excuses in the world, but it was because they didn't plan initially for that 100% growth. So when they got that 100% growth, they hit that peak, they're all excited. They think they're going to keep doing it, but it's basically pulling the carpet out from under them. It's like their manufacturing can't keep up, or their supply chain can't keep up, because they didn't plan properly. It was that simple, And so that's why I say it's hard, because it's a lot of planning ahead of time. We had a saying in the Navy. I love the saying. It was like the 7 Ps. It was proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And most companies, they grow fast, but they don't have that planning in order to sustain the growth, is what I see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, because if you grow too fast, then it just basically explodes, and so you have to kind of grow very, very slowly, and kind of and then it's interesting how businesses scale, and basically you're manufacturing here it's software. So it's another key component of your work is leadership and trust. And obviously, the trust environment here in the States is quite low. And a lot of people, they want to start their own companies. They don't trust corporate America.
Yeah.
So what are some experiences or tidbits when you're building or rebuilding trust in an organization?
What I see, it's definitely company to company, right? You never read about in the paper all the great high trust companies because they don't hit the paper, and I would say most of the companies, most of the large companies, most of the mid-sized companies do a fantastic job with building that trust. If you've ever read the book, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, it's a great book. And it's like, there's a lot of companies that have that trust. And all you need is one bad manager or one bad VP, and that part of that company will just implode. It's like, it's that one person that destroys the trust, breaks down that trust, that causes the issue. And then people got to differentiate. Well, is it the whole company or is it that one person? First, I worked for some amazing, great people over the years, right? And I've worked for a couple ones that is like, I would never work for that person again, nor would I recommend anybody ever work for that person again, and I'm not obviously not going to name names, right?
Yeah.
But it's you got to build that trust. And when you maintain it, you got to maintain that trust too. And that takes work. That takes active work to maintain that trust in different ways. But trust goes a long way. You get the speed of trust. You can make things happen faster. You are not going to grow 100% a year without high trust.
Yeah.
Show me a company that did that. I don't know of one company that didn't have high trust, making things happen real fast. You have to have that trust in order to make that happen. Otherwise, you're never going to do it.
Yeah, I love they say that it takes, decades to build trust, and then like it can take a second to, just break that trust. And yeah, it's quite interesting. I really enjoyed this conversation. And if people want to reach out to you or follow your socials, check out your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, I would go to my website first, www.chelwoodgroup.com. It's CHEL woodgroup.com, or you can email me at scott@chelwoodgroup.com. We do a lot of work with manufacturing companies, so we can help build and design very lean and efficient plants. We can help scale up your production. We can make your production more efficient, fix your quality issues, everything manufacturing, operation, supply chain. We got a team of people that can help you out in different areas.
Yeah, I love that. And so for the audience, be sure to follow and like Scott's socials and check out his work. Reach out to him, and thanks so much for coming on.